Going to wait one more minute to give folks a chance to sign on. All right, I think we can get started. So welcome everybody. This webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with those that can't make it and make it available on our website later. Everyone's microphones are muted or should be muted, but feel free to keep your video on if you'd like. Please use the chat function to submit your questions. We will answer them at the end of this webinar. If you're not familiar with the chat function, you can select chat at the bottom of your Zoom window to type a message. And if you are having any technical difficulties, go ahead and type them in the chat. We have a few folks on as well who can help resolve those as best as we can. All right, so just to review, if you're in a computer at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the icons mute and unmute, start and stop video. The red slash across the microphone during the presentation is where you can mute and unmute. The chat icon is where you can type your your questions into the box. And like I said, we'll be reviewing questions at the end. If you're joining by smartphone or tablet, you'll see a row of icons either at the top or bottom of your screen. And you can find the mute and unmute buttons and start stop video buttons there. All right. If you are joining us by phone, press *6 to mute and unmute, or press *9 to raise your hand. All right, so with that, please, if you can, hit those mute buttons and we will get started. Thank you. All right, so thanks for joining us to learn more about the upcoming 4Rs Grants Program. First, a brief introduction. The 4Rs Grants Program is one of many programs that comes from the Office of Sustainability, also known as OOS. The primary objectives of OOS are to promote sustainability in the county through the planning, development, and implementation of programs in the areas of livable communities, energy and water, climate change, and waste reduction. I'd like to introduce you to our 4Rs Grants Program team: Gerald Schwartz, Kevin Liu, myself, and Ansu Lim. The four of us will be the grant advisors for the new grant recipients in the upcoming 2022-2023 grant cycle. This webinar will give you a brief overview about the 4Rs Grants Program and objectives, applicant eligibility requirements, eligible and ineligible expenses under a 4Rs grant, as well as important application information and tips. All right, so with that, let's jump right in. The main objective of the 4Rs Grants Program is to help eligible organizations create and implement reuse, waste reduction, recycling, and composting projects and programs in San Mateo County as part of an overall waste reduction strategy of diverting waste from being sent to the landfill. Who can apply? Government agencies, nonprofit organizations, public or nonprofit educational institutions. Applicants can be based outside of San Mateo County, but their proposed grant project must take place within San Mateo County boundaries and serve San Mateo County residents. How long are projects funded? Projects are funded for a duration of 1 year, ideally starting in late summer or early fall and ending at the same time the following year. Typically, funds begin to be distributed in September. A helpful tip when submitting your application is to make sure your project timelines begin in either late summer or early fall to avoid rewriting submitted timelines. How much grant funding is available? The 4Rs Grant Program has been distributing an average of about $240,000 per year for the past few years to grantees. Applicants can either apply for mini grants between $2,000 and up to $5,000, or mega grants up to $25,000. There are separate grant guidelines and applications for each. A full guide for mini and mega grant applications and frequently asked questions is now available on our website. So whether the application is for a mini or mega grant, Projects must have at least one of the 4Rs as the central focus to be considered eligible for a 4Rs grant. Projects can touch upon other sustainability areas such as energy and water conservation, climate change, or green transportation. But if they do not have at least one of the 4Rs as a central focus, they cannot be considered for a 4Rs grant, unfortunately. Both mini and mega grant proposals must aim to increase awareness about the 4Rs and provide opportunities for San Mateo community members, especially children, youth, and underserved communities, to become active stewards of our local environment. Projects should aim for longevity and sustainability over time. A couple of differences between mini and mega grant funding is that mini grants can target specific communities or groups, while mega grants should aim for county-wide impact. Strong consideration will be given to mega grant projects that provide an innovative service that fill a need not currently being met by the solid waste sector in San Mateo County. The 4Rs grants have funded a diverse array of 4Rs projects over the years. Here's a sample of eligible projects: fix-it clinics, repair cafes, or other creative reuse or repair projects. Events such as workshops and trainings related to environmental education around the 4Rs. Materials and costs associated with improving or implementing a campus facility-wide recycling, reuse, or waste reduction program. Materials and costs associated with improving or implementing a materials rescue and redistribution program, or food rescue and redistribution programs. Outreach programs to promote the 4Rs, so anything related to signs, posters, brochures, and flyers is covered under 4Rs grants, as well as field trips for environmental outings to waste or recycling facilities, natural areas, museums, or interpretive centers, or for nonprofit workshops or classes. The trip theme must have a solid waste or 4Rs focus, and the destination must be within or near San Mateo County. And you can always visit our site for more ideas. We have them listed all there. So home and backyard composting education workshops are already offered through the Office of Sustainability. However, a 4Rs grants can go to a project that complements this existing program. If you are unsure, contact us, and so we can discuss it. We can discuss it further. I forgot to preface, I think I missed something here, that we do have existing waste reduction programs, and these slides here are meant to give you an idea of what already exists so that your projects can complement these already existing programs that come from our office. So the recent implementation of Senate Bill 1383, also known as the short-lived climate pollutant strategy, sets targets for the increased composting of organic waste and edible food recovery. If you have an idea or project that can complement, strengthen, or grow OOS's existing efforts in food recovery, your proposal may have a good chance of getting funded by a 4Rs grant. For example, pilot food recovery programs that received 4Rs grants in previous cycles now serve as county-wide models. So we're very grateful for that. Now that we've covered eligible project ideas, I'm going to move on to a list of eligible and ineligible expenses covered by the 4Rs grants. Remember, all of this information is available on our grant application guidelines found on the 4Rs grant webpage. All right, so any labor costs that are in-house or contracted services are covered under 4Rs grants. Hourly rates must be included in the budget sections of your application and also must be paid at the county's living wage ordinance, which is $18 an hour currently. Any equipment, supplies, and materials such as recycling and composting bins, posters and stickers, composting tools, environmental education curriculum, outreach and educational materials and expenses related to curriculum development, lesson plans, lesson plan printouts, any work going to the graphic designer, materials, supplies, or props used for instruction. Advertising and marketing fees are also eligible expenses. Event expenses, venue reservations, costs, equipment rentals, speaker fees, And field trip fees, as well as the transportation fees, entrance, and any guide or educational fees are eligible as well. The following are examples of ineligible expenses that cannot be included in a 4Rs grant budget or paid for with 4Rs grant funding. Any overhead costs, insurance, internet, utilities, etc. Food and beverage, unfortunately, are not covered unless they are used directly for educational purposes. For example, if there is going to be a food waste lesson and cooking class, perhaps you need additional ingredients, those are covered. But if you are just having an event, the funding cannot go towards purchasing food and beverage to be served exclusively. Expenses for activities incurred before the grant agreement execution. So all expenses that will be covered have to be between the dates in the agreement. Monetary awards or gift cards, donations, membership fees, legal fees or indemnity obligations, repayment of debts, loan or bank fees, fines or penalties. These are not covered under the 4Rs grants. Additionally, all grantees must possess insurance that meets the following requirements. All grantees will maintain comprehensive liability insurance coverage up to $1 million during the term of the grant agreement. If applicable to the grantee during the length of the agreement, the grantee will maintain professional liability insurance coverage and motor vehicle liability insurance coverage up to $1 million. All grantees must have workers' compensation and employers' liability insurance, providing full statutory coverage as required by state law. And proof of these insurance requirements must be provided by the grant recipients after notice of grant award. Important to note for mini or mega grant applicants is if funding for staff or contractual labor is being requested, applicants must comply with the county's living wage ordinance. The living wage ordinance requirement for the upcoming 4Rs grant program cycle will be $18 an hour. For additional information on the county's living wage ordinance, including who must comply, you can visit the link on this page or type San Mateo County Living Wage Ordinance in your search bar. Regardless of whether an entity has been awarded a 4Rs grant, either the mega or mini in the past, an entity can apply again for the upcoming 4Rs grants program. The entity will need to demonstrate in the grant application how the project proposal that is being submitted will build off, improve, augment the past project. If there is a connection to a past project that was funded by the 4Rs grants program. Conversely, applicants can apply for funding for a completely different project area. And local governments and nonprofit organizations will only be allowed to submit one application in each grant category, at most one mega grant application, or at most one mini grant application. Public and nonprofit educational institutions will be allowed to submit more than one application within each grant category, as long as the benefiting organizations are not the same. For example, a school district may submit 2 or more mini grant proposals for 3 individual schools in its district, but cannot submit 2 or more mini grant proposals for 1 school in the same district. If a district will be applying for multiple mini grants, we encourage you to take note of the following. School districts can apply for a mega grant as long as they abide by the following criteria. Number 1, there are 5 or more K-12 schools in its district, or there is more than 1 K-12 school in its district, and at least half of these schools are free reduced lunch program, or 32% of the student population qualify for the free reduced lunch program. And additionally, all of the district's K-12 schools will need to participate in the proposed mega grant project. As of yesterday, February 7th, important documents such as the grant guidelines, grants Q&A, and grants application for reference only in Word doc are available on the 4Rs Grants webpage. All of these documents are available in Spanish and simplified Chinese as language assistant resources. However, please note that the final submitted online application responses and attachments must be filled out in English, and if awarded, All subsequent communication will also be in English. Once the application window closes, which will be March 21st, fully complete submitted applications will be scored on the following criteria. Project concepts and objectives. Are the project concept and objectives clear, comprehensive, well thought out, and practical? Do the project objectives align clearly with those of the grant? Project implementation and timeline. Are the project activities well-defined, well-planned, practical, and technically feasible with a realistic timeline? Project budget. Is the project budget reasonable, realistic, and cost-effective? Project deliverables, outcomes, and evaluation. Are the project deliverables and outcomes clearly stated, specific, realistic, reflective of the success of the project, and when appropriate, measurable and quantifiable? Project team. Are the management, staff, and our students qualified and experienced to implement project and achieve the stated objectives? And lastly, grant application and written communication. Has the applicant followed all instructions detailed in that grant application? Is the proposal well written, clear, complete, concise, free of grammar and spelling mistakes? And most importantly, all attachments have been included. For previous grantees, sometimes past performance is taken into account when scoring applicants. Some helpful tips to remember. Remember, the objective of your proposed project should align with the objectives of the 4Rs Grants program. Carefully review the grant application guidelines and Q&A and follow the instructions in the applications. Provide all and complete information requested in the application, for example, your budget and your project timeline. Double check for ineligible expenses in your proposed budget before hitting submit. Make sure your implementation plan is clear, with detailed info on how the project will be carried out. Attach letters of commitment from partners if applicable. And don't assume the readers are knowledgeable about your organization or project history. And always double check for spelling, grammar, and clarity of information as much as possible. 4Rs Grant staff will be having virtual office hours on the following days and times to answer any questions you might have regarding project requirements, eligibility, expenses, insurance requirements, etc. These will be held via Zoom, and the links are available on the 4Rs Grants webpage. Times with an asterisk will be the days that Spanish-speaking staff will be available. And this year, 4Rs grant writing support will be available by way of generous volunteers. We have a volunteer grant writing mentor from the Office of Sustainability Academy, who will be available to provide grant review assistance. To contact this volunteer, you will email Camille Lang with the following information: the name, your name, the organization name, the type of support you're seeking, for example, with research, writing, or guidance, and a short summary of the proposed idea. Rethink Waste is also offering grant writing support to entities located in their service area on a first-come, first-served basis, depending on their staff capacity. To make a request for assistance, you will fill out the form located at the link, which will also, all of these will be available on our 4Rs Grants webpage. And importantly, these resources are intended to support entities with limited resources or limited experience in grant writing, and priority will be given to those entities. So this information will all be available on the 4Rs Grants webpage. To conclude this webinar, let's review important dates for this year's 4Rs grant cycle. So the call for grant applications is open as of yesterday, February 7th. March 21st at 6 p.m. will be the application deadline for grant applicants. The end of May of this year, the Grant Evaluation Committee determines and finalizes the list of new grant recipients. OOS staff will notify all applicants of the results towards the end of May. In early June, OOS staff will initiate grant agreements and other paperwork with the new grant recipients. By the end of August, OOS and grant recipients will finalize and sign the grant agreements. In September, we ideally start grant funding distribution for both mini and mega grant applicants. Important to note is that mega grant applicants will receive two installments or two grant disbursements. The first one will be at the beginning, and the second one will be provided at the end of the project once the final report has been submitted and reviewed by OOS staff. And 1 year after start date in your grant agreement, the grant recipient will submit a final report to OOS, and this does apply to both mini and mega grant applicants. All right, so thank you for attending this webinar. Please remember to visit the 4Rs Grants Program webpage to access all the information and documents covered today. You can also contact our staff by email or phone. Thanks again and good luck. And with that, we will conclude this presentation and open up the chat for questions. So I will stop sharing my screen. And I will answer your question as best as I can, but if I cannot, I do have my colleagues here with me as well who can help. Let me just go ahead and check the chat real quick.
Hey, Esme, so far we have one question
Mm-hmm.
on timeline. The question is, when will grantees hear back about if their funding request has been accepted?
Yes, thank you. End of May is when we are slated or plan to be finished with scoring, and that's when we will let grantees know that their funding request has been accepted. Thank you for that question, Naomi.
And there's another question. Can individual schools apply for a mega grant, or is it only open to districts?
Yes, so for mega grant, it would only be for districts, and it would have to be following the criteria. So we realize that districts are different sizes within the county, which is why we came up with the criteria that I went over briefly in that slide. But all of this is in the grant application guidelines. So if you need to check what criteria you need to check off before you see if you can apply for the mega grant for your district, go to the mega grant guidelines and double check there.
Can I mention one thing about schools also?
Yes, of course.
Hi, everyone. I just want to mention that with schools, if it's a public school, no matter what, the district would need to apply for that public school because that is the funding source for the school. Now, if it's like a PTO, which is a nonprofit, they can also apply for a grant specifically at the site for that school. But then the PTO, if it's a nonprofit organization, would be the one in charge of the grant.
All right, I hope that answers your question. And
Just to piggyback, provide additional information. And this is in response to CS's question. If you do have a specific school, not school district, but a school in mind, then the preferable grant category would be mini grant. But then the school district that represents that one specific school you have in mind, they will need to go into contract with the county. I hope that helps.
cool.
Okay, there's a few more questions coming in. Let's see. The next question is funding for external recycling programs like TerraCycle acceptable for using grant money?
Is funding for external recycling programs acceptable for using grant money? I'm assuming that you're meaning that this money will pay for the shipping fees that go towards sending back any any type of materials? Okay, the need to pay for boxes. Okay. I'm actually not sure. Ansu, would that be something that would be covered under 4Rs grants? I think so. I want to say yes, but I want to double check with Ansu.
Yeah, I think that's acceptable. It would be considered kind of like an equipment, because TerraCycle is usually used to collect traditionally items that are not typically recyclable. So it would the grant can be used to pay for the TerraCycle, the shipping of that box. Yes. Okay, next question is, it's from Street Life Ministries. They received funding last year, and they have a question: can they apply for the same program again to keep it going another year, or would we prefer that they come up with and apply for a new program?
Well, you can build upon the program that you started in the previous grant cycle. So yes, we definitely encourage you to reapply, and in the application, let us know how this new grant cycle is building off, augmenting, improving what your project was in the previous year. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, it seems like it did. Thanks, Nicholas, for your question. Okay, next question. Naomi asked, are there any main differences or changes this year's grant program from previous years?
I don't think so. The biggest change we had in the previous year was that we opened it up for districts to apply for mega grants. But this year, everything, those changes stayed the same. Again, if a district is going to apply for a mega grant, all of its schools will have to be involved.
Just to expand on that, Esme's right, most of the criteria for current year's mini and mega requirements, they haven't changed. I think the only thing that might have slightly been changed is the criteria for school districts to be eligible to apply for the mega grant. So this, a school district needing to have at least 5 schools, or if the school district has more than one school, but at least 50% of the schools have the free lunch, the federal free lunch program, and having all the schools participating in the mega grant. So that requirement was slightly modified from previous year.
Thank you, Ansu.
Okay, next question is from Elaine's. Elaine has a question: is the grants only for schools, or is it something after school programs can apply also?
No, I think as long as there is a applying entity, an after school program is eligible to apply as well. Again, it does have to be under an organizational entity that would have to apply if it's on behalf of the after school program, or if it's a mini grant. I'm not quite sure of the structure there. If it's a nonprofit running the after school program, then the nonprofit would apply, the nonprofit organization. If the after school program belongs to this, is run by the school itself, then perhaps it would need to come through the district. I mean, the school will apply, but eventually the money goes to the district first, who then distributes it to the school. I think I'm correct there.
So if I could chime in,
Mhm.
exactly what Esme was saying, it could be fall under the school or whatever nonprofit organization is associated with that after school program. So if it's like Boys and Girls Club, you know, if it's like the Heal Project, environmental volunteers, or, you know, as long as it's a nonprofit organization, but if it's a for-profit after-school program, then they would be ineligible to apply. So the key word is nonprofit.
Okay, the next question is from Susan. Would a program that involves high school and/or college student be a good proposal?
Absolutely, as long as the applying entity, as Gerald reminded us again, is a nonprofit, then yes, absolutely. This program is available for everybody, all ages. Definitely welcome. We've had some really good proposals from high schoolers in the past, as well as from college, the college district.
Okay, next question is from Amy. How many of each grant type can be funded this term?
How many of each grant type? Do you mean how many grants we're giving out in total?
I think it's, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but okay, so Amy said yes.
Yeah, it's, I think we give about an average to about 20 applicants, anywhere between 16 and 22 applicants per year. And about an average of 240,000 per year is what has been distributed in the past few years. So there's a good chance your project will be funded.
Any other questions that folks want to ask? We'll wait a couple more minutes in case you guys are busy typing it into the chat. And I also want to state that if a question pops in your mind after this webinar that you forget to ask during the webinar, that's okay. You could always reach out to us through our hotline, through our email. You can pop in during any of the virtual office hours that we're going to be setting up. So there are multiple ways for you to reach back out to us if you have additional questions in the future. We have another question from Erin that just came in. Her question is the program still accepting applications from organizations via nonprofit fiscal agents?
I want to say yes, because we had that type of applicant in this past year, where it was a nonprofit fiscal agent applying on behalf of a school, which was awarded. So I think the answer to that is just a straight yes. Ansu, is that good? Is that correct?
Yes, since technically it's the nonprofit that's going into contract with the county. Yes, that nonprofit, that program under the umbrella of that nonprofit can enter into contract with the county. So yes.
Awesome. All right. I think we've answered everybody's questions here. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for joining us on this webinar. And we look forward to receiving your applications. As Ansu said, there will be office hours. You can contact us anytime. We will reply by email or by phone. So thanks, everybody. Looking forward to receiving those applications this year, and have a good day. Thank you for joining us.